So, Brad, I got a hilarious look at the future yesterday, and I got to share this with you. So my wife and I are going to a big production in downtown LA. I might as well say it. We're going to the Emmys. And
I was going to say, we know where you were going.
We're going to the Emmys, and because it's the Emmys, they have a surprisingly large number of blocks like coned off and blocked off downtown. Like you had to drive a really weird and specific way to get there. Anyway, long story short.
Yeah.
There is a Waymo car. Are you familiar with these? They're white.
No.
They always tend to be white cars that have like 48 sensors built around them. They're autonomous cars. There's no driver, right? And they're legal on the streets of Los Angeles and I think San Francisco and a few other cities to drive autonomously. And they're used kind of like an Uber. I'm sure they're at a loss for the company, but Google is trying to, I think it's Google that owns Waymo. Anyway, they're on the streets of LA. So we see the most amazing interaction because there's traffic cones up, like 5 traffic cops are on the street. That's how big the street is in LA. And they're actively waving people where to go in lieu of going down the street. This Waymo car, for whatever reason, its software doesn't register the cones, doesn't register the cops, and continues to keep driving in the same direction, albeit at like 5 miles an hour, not fast. Yeah. But the cop is like screaming at the car, "Stop that car! This is not a way to go!" and there's a guy who's a passenger, but he's in the back seat. So he rolls down his window. He goes, "Officer, this isn't my car." He goes, the officer starts cussing. He's like, "I don't give a shit. You are not coming down this way. Stop that car." He goes, "Officer, I have no software to control this car. I'm a passenger." Yeah. He goes, "Then get in the front seat." He goes, "It's not my car. I can't drive this thing." And he goes, and the officer's getting angry, like, "You stop that fucking car right now." He's like, "Officer, it is like," so from everybody's perspective, it was totally valid that they were getting frustrated. The passenger is like, "I have no validity to jump in the front seat of this car and drive it. I don't even know if it will accept manual." I mean, I'm sure it would, but accept manual input. And the cop's like, "I don't give a shit. Stop that car. You're in it. You cannot go down this street. There are like, cop cars blocking this off." And what kind of future are we hurtling towards, Brad, where like a human is that was the first time, honest to God, if you think about it, this is the first time I saw in my life a human yelling at a robot and the robot not responding.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. And a helpless human in the back, caught in the middle of it all. Right. Caught
so
in
my lifetime, and I'm sure I will see this again, this was the first time I saw 2 humans powerless against one robot who was not listening and had no way of responding to signals. We will see that again, but like,
oh my God,
it was fascinating to see for the first time because they had no way of stopping this thing.
It's like being on hold and dealing with a chat bot, but in real life. Like you're
and the real life thing has 4,000 pounds that can throw at you,
Yes, and the other real life thing has a gun, and in many cases that has not ended well for people.
Yeah, so so the winner of the night for most dramatic performance was that cop because holy hell,
no kidding,
he went from 0 to 60, and everybody involved had no good solution. It was bonkers.
Oh yeah, that's amazing.
So I have no caveat on this other than to say it was the first time in my life that I saw humans lose to a robot, and we pulled away before we saw the conclusion of it, but it was fascinating to see the guy in the backseat roll down his window and go, "I have no power in this situation. I'm just sitting in a car.
I'm innocent."
And so on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show where 2 guys also fail to the modern era about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, proud owner of the worst transition I've ever had right there. I'm the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of the documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have a big show for everybody. And I'm excited to get into this one. We got some really good questions coming in over at patreon.com/comiclab. Brad, did you want to do your updates first? Because I know you had a fun one that you wanted to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Well, this just came across the trestle today. And that
Wait, pause for a second. What is a trestle?
A trestle? I thought it was like that part that's over top of your door. Like if you've got a window over top of your door, isn't that the trestle?
I genuinely don't. I've never.
Oh no, that's a transom.
So it's like the horizontal part of the door.
And you know how some doors have windows over top of them?
Yes.
That's called a transom.
Oh, you said trestle though, not transom.
Not in the way that you thought that I said. No, but that's it came over the transom.
So how does something come over the trestle?
That's a train. Trains go over trestles and updates come over transoms.
Oh, I love this improv game that we've stumbled into. This is great. This is amazing. Okay, anyway, I'm sorry. So something came over your transom.
So this just came over the transom, and Patreon has enabled. You remember how we were talking shortly about being able to recommend other creators on Patreon, and how Patreon was kind of catching up to Substack in that regard. Well, not safe for work artists were not included in that, and so anything with NSFW takes a little bit of extra legal wrangling, but Patreon got it done relatively quickly, and I'm happy to announce now that if you're an NSFW artist, you can now participate in recommending other NSFW people on Patreon.
That's great. Well, thank you for that show update on the beginning of the show here, and I've got our first question coming in over at patreon.com/Comic Lab. And this says, Brad and Dave, help. How do I get back to be able to write jokes fast? When I started 2 months ago, I could literally come up with 3 jokes in 15 minutes. My goal was 5 per day so I could pick out the best. Now I'm only watching a blank piece of paper. My judges are my brother and my best friend. I think they have a good editorial eye. They're honest and they're very selective. And this whole thing might have started when my brother rejected 15 jokes at once. So, Brad, couple things to consider with this question. They are 2 months in. They were at one point writing 3 jokes in 15 minutes. And then they had 15 jokes rejected. Bang, 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 bang. Yeah. What's going on here? And what is your advice for this person?
Oh, well, there's a lot here to unpack. There's a reason I'm happy that we're making this the first question of the show, because I think there's a lot here. The first thing I want you to do is go back and listen to episode number 352. It's the one that we called Make It Work, Make It Right, Make It Fast. And you're going to hear a lot of parallels between that and this topic, because what happened a lot of times, what that question that started us off on 352 was, you were saying, it seems like I'm getting slower the better I get. And why is that? And we were saying, in fact, I think I said, there's a reason that you were faster in the beginning. You didn't know what the hell you were doing. And everything was great. You're in the honeymoon of your creativity, and everything's flowing because you don't know anything. And of course you're fast when you're doing that. Right. You're very fast. You're very free. And by the way, there's something that's fantastic about that, and something that all of us try to go back and reach back and recapture. But don't you think that part of it is very natural, Dave, that he started out fast because this person just didn't really have any parameters in mind. They were just putting humor out there for the sake of putting humor on a page.
Yeah, I will actually be a little bit harsher, but in a way with love. Brad was saying you were going fast because you didn't know what you were doing, and I agree with that. But I will also be a little harsher and say you were going fast because they weren't very good, most likely. I've never read them. I've never seen them. You were able to go fast because your aesthetic eye was brand new. You were like, yeah, this will do. Let's put this on a piece of paper. And everybody involved, your friends, your brothers, everybody involved was like, yeah, this is good. Put this down. 2 months in now, you've probably got a dozen or so under your belt. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Those were kind of the low-hanging first pass ideas in brainstorming. And for those who are Patreon members of Comic Lab, for example, Brad and I occasionally will do a thing called Writer's Room, and you will see in real time 2 pros trying to work through an idea. And I honestly could draw a line on any one of those writing room shows where at the end of 30 minutes, we've gotten to a really good idea. But at the 5-minute point, at the 15-minute point, at the 20-minute point, I could draw a line and say, Dave Kellett in year 5 would have taken this joke. Dave Kellett in year 10 would have taken this joke at the 15-minute mark. Dave Kellett at the 20-year mark would have taken literally at the minute mark compares to the year mark. And so what I'm getting at there is that you're more willing to accept the low-hanging fruit that comes with brainstorming because your aesthetic eye, your editorial eye is not as polished. And so what you're feeling is you're getting better. Your aesthetic is improving. Your editorial eye is improving. Your writing is not improving yet, but your aesthetic and your editorial eye, the parts that are saying, is this good, are getting better. And so it's slowing you down a little bit, and that's okay. Because at first, like Brad said, you were making it work. You were getting it out. Now your brain says, let's make it right. And that slows things down. There's a reason why make it fast is the third one, because that takes years and years and years of making it right, and then you can speed things up. So this next phase is actually, in some respects, an unsatisfying phase because you are getting better. Means you're going to be going slower than you did when you're at first blush. Don't you think, Brad?
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 99%.
That was an amazing walk back. I agree with you 100%. Well, let's be honest. I mean, that's generous.
Well, because I know what here's my question. Because the key word in what you just got done saying was when you said your editorial eye and you said your sense of aesthetic. Now, here's my question for you. This is why I go from 100 to 99. This person is writing and then putting it in front of their brother and their best friend who's giving them a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Right.
Now, I'm going to put a caveat here. If this brother and this, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to just hit you with it. Would you ever work like that?
Me, Dave Kellett? Is that what you're saying?
You, Dave Kellett, would you ever work like that?
No.
Would you ever recommend somebody work like that?
No, and I know where you're going with this, and it's because I need to develop my own editorial eye.
Yes, and also
I don't necessarily trust their editorial eye 100%. Like, if I can't trust myself, who can I trust, basically, in this process, you know?
Here's my question. What funny stuff did the brother write? What funny stuff did the best friend write? Now, if this best friend has a pedigree, a proven history of being able to write and produce funny stuff, not just they're funny at a party, that's bullshit. Put funny stuff on a piece of paper. That's a whole different aspect of comedy. If this person and his brother are able to do that procedure of making funny happen on a sheet of paper, then I'll listen to them. That's why when you're in writers, if you asked me to do a writer's room podcast with anybody else than somebody like yourself, I'm going to say no, unless I see that person has a history, a proven pedigree of doing the work that's involved with writing comedy. Otherwise, they don't have anything other than an opinion, and every asshole out there has an opinion. There's nothing special about this person's opinion.
I will push back a little bit on your pushback. I generally agree with you, but I would argue that there are people in this world that are built for editorializing and not creating. They do exist. Lorne Michaels is arguably one of the best producers of comedic television that's ever lived. He is not a funny dude. You talk to him or you see him interviewed, and he is not funny. He's dry. He's kind of boring. He's not very personable. He doesn't know how to sell a joke even when he finds something funny. And yet he has an eye for humor. So I just generally, I'm pushing back, not specifically, but generally. But more specifically for this cartoonist, I 100% agree with Brad, because at our level of doing anything, editors are not going to be involved in the process in a paid way for years and years and years in your career. And most importantly, regardless of whether or not you ever get editors or publishers that can review your work, right now, you need to build up your editorial eye. So regardless of whether or not you will eventually have editors, right now you've got to build that muscle. And so I will co-sign with Brad that, like, to heck with them, you've got to learn to judge, review, refine, and reframe any jokes that you are writing such that they really work and really land.
Yeah. And I'll agree with what you said. And for as far as if Lauren Michaels walked in and said, Brad, I wanna talk to you about some of the stuff you've been writing. Great. Because Lauren Michaels has a proven pedigree of doing this at the professional level for a long time. And so he's got something worth saying.
Yeah, yes.
Otherwise, you're just another person with an opinion. And have you ever met anybody, Dave, who said to you, you know what, Dave Kellett, I don't have a good sense of humor? Have you ever met anybody who said that they themselves do not have a good sense of humor?
Rarely.
It's never happened as far as I know in human history. Nobody has ever said, I myself have a bad sense of humor. It's kind of like
music. Everybody thinks they have good taste in music. And there's a lot of people that don't, you know?
But we know for a fact that having a good sense of humor is actually kind of rare.
Yeah, yeah.
And most people walking around there, they confuse the fact that they think they have a sense of humor with the fact that they have an opinion. And like I just said, everybody's got an opinion. And until that person has an opinion that is proven to have worth something, then I'm telling you, your creative process is precious and it's personal and it's yours and yours alone from my standpoint. Now, you might find that there might be a very good argument against that. But holy shit, I would never let anyone tell me, unless they had the pedigree, tell me that something that I wrote wasn't funny. And also, I'd go one step further. I'd say that the more you let this person, this brother and friend, the more you let them tell you what is funny and what's not, the more you're wasting time on developing your own sense of aesthetic, your own sense of what's funny. And that's really what you need. Just let's take a hypothetical. What happens if the brother, and God forbid, heaven forfend, the brother and the best friend gets hit by a bus? Now you don't have them. You've been working for 10 years. You've never developed your own sense of aesthetic. Yeah. You just do what they tell you to do. Is that, thumbs up or thumbs down? Part of what you should be doing at this part of your life and this part of your creativity is developing your own aesthetic. And that means finding out what you think is funny, where you find humor, what your distinct voice is.
I want to say that I agree with Brad and I co-sign, but I want to downshift this a little bit because I'm listening to myself and I'm listening to Brad. And I want to just say, I get it. I get why you're 2 months in and you don't yet have an audience and you want some kind of feedback. So right. I just want to downshift this a little bit by saying, I get it. You just want some feedback on how it's working, what's working, and if it's working. And that's totally natural. So take what Brad and I are saying with a grain of salt, because in the larger realm and the larger scope of your career, we're right. But we also get it that in the short term, you're just looking for feedback on like, hey, I'm new to this. I'm 2 months in. Am I shooting blanks on this? And shooting blanks on this. I don't know why I went with that. Because you don't have an audience yet. And so you want some kind of feedback. So I just want to say on a human level, I get that. I do understand. And Brad gets that too. But we're just saying like, this is a muscle that you will need to develop in the sense that you don't like do your pencils at this stage and then pass it off to someone and be like, okay, do my inks. No, you're going to be doing your own inks on your own pencils. Right. Like that's a muscle you need to develop. So much like you're right with your inking, your writing, you've got to take it to completion, which means editing your own work. Yeah. And I'll double underline that in that the brother and the best friend, what they're doing out of kindness. They're doing out of love. They're doing this because they want to help. They want. It's not like they're over there, snapping the whip, saying, you're terrible. Although rejecting 15 jokes. Here's the other thing. Maybe they're tired of doing it. By the way, maybe that's why they got 15 rejections. But I don't want to paint them as bad people. No. I'm sure they're trying to help. But here's the other thing, I want to emphasize this too, and this is the other thing that set me off here. They're sitting there giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down. This is good. This is funny. This is not funny. That's not what you want out of an editor. That's not what you want out of a writing partner. What you want is
That's a good concept. Now let's talk about how to build it to where it's really funny.
That would be a truly contributory
That's
approach.
helpful.
Yeah.
Right. That's help. Not thumbs up, thumbs down,
Right.
but, I see you've got the start of something here. I see where you're going. And because I know what I'm doing as a writer, I'm going to participate in helping this process to get us to a point of where it's funny. That I get. I guess the part that really I reject outright is them just sitting there saying thumbs up, thumbs down. Writing is not like that, right? If you're going to be in an editorial position, you have to be able to bring the goods to the extent that you say, like I said, this isn't there yet, but here's how we're going to get it there.
Right. Like, remember at the beginning of the show, Brad and I accidentally stumbled upon an improv game where every time I would ask what trestle is, he would reintroduce a different word starting with T, which was a funny approach. And so the answer there is to not stop Brad and say, wait, you're switching words. The answer in that improv game is to say yes and, like to just keep building on the joke, right? And so what Brad's saying here is that a good editor doesn't shut the door. They yes and your creativity, right? They say, I see where you're going with pages 23 through 24.
Yeah.
Let's yes and get to a better place for where this arc could be developed or how this could work or how this dialogue could play out. So I agree with Brad. But I also want to get back to the core question here, which is that you find yourself slowing down in ideas. And in general, I also just want to say from a purely creative standpoint, that too is natural because every new creative project has a honeymoon phase where you're just excited to be working. Yeah. And so your brain, while you're showering, while you're cooking, while you're driving, while you're taking the metro, it's working on ideas for you because it's excited for you. You're now getting into the phase that's exiting the honeymoon stage and now going into the, I don't want to say drudgery because it's not drudgery, but it's less of the joy-filled honeymoon post-wedding, everything is bliss. Now you're back at the apartment, you've been married for 2 months, and now the bills are starting to come due. Do you know what I mean, Brad? Like it's literally, there's a reason why we call it the honeymoon phase, is that eventually life starts to come due. And eventually for this project, the honeymoon phase ends and the daily, weekly drudgery or more drudgery adjacent work begins, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess I agree with everything you said. And I'm going to add that now imagine everything you just said. And instead of judging it on your own sense of humor, you're trying to guess if your brother's going to think it's funny. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's
yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a really valid point. Now you're preemptively editing for your brother and their friend or whatever. Yeah.
And so that's why he's not, I by the way, I don't know the gender of this person. I just used a default he, but that's why this person is not going and writing as much because they're like, oh, Joe's not going to like that. Bill's not going to like. You shouldn't be doing any of that. You should be going back to those first days when you were putting 15 on a sheet because you enjoyed that process.
Yes, and I will tell you
the difference.
I will tell you because this has happened both ways with Brad and I. Brad and I have pitched an idea to our friend. Brad's come to me and been like, Dave, what do you think of this one? And I'll maybe try to workshop it with him, but my heart's not in it because I'm like, I don't really like this idea. This is not great. Yeah. And Brad, because he believes in himself and he knows his own writing, is like, to hell with Dave. I'm doing this one anyway. And it goes on to be a viral hit, right? So what the lesson to be drawn from that is Brad has developed his own editor that, yes, will from time to time chime in with friends and family and see what they think of this or that idea. But he knows in his gut when something is working because he's developed his own North Star in his heart about his own editorial style, his own writing style, and when a joke is working. And the opposite has been true. There have been times I brought an idea to Brad and he's like, I don't know, it's not my favorite. And yet I go on and like, you know what I mean? I'm like, in my style with my writing, I know this joke can work. And so what I'm saying is...
To your audience.
What's that? Yeah.
To your audience.
To my audience. And also, this goes back to a core tenet that Brad always talks about, which is you are writing for your readers, not for your reader. And in this case, your reader is your sibling and your friend. And that can get a little tricky because you're writing for a big... kind of amorphous blob of readers, anytime 30% of which won't like that day's joke. That's okay. They might be cool on it or they might be actively disliking it. you're writing for an amorphous blob that somewhat it represents in mass who you are as a person. So these 10,000 people represent a version of what your humor is. And so you're writing first and foremost for you, sharing it with the world, and you're sharing it to readers, not to reader.
Yeah. If I ran everything past my two sons, both of whom have verifiably excellent senses of humor in their own way, if I ran everything by my sons, I'd never write anything. They don't think anything I've ever written is funny.
Yeah.
Ever. Right. I'd have to close up shop and open a hot dog stand tomorrow if I was relying on them. And they both have.
Would not be a dissimilar business in terms of shapes and
exactly. You know, I went right for those familiar shapes. Yeah. But listen, Dave, before we wrap up the first half hour of the show, you had one update you wanted to slide in there as well before we go any further.
Oh yeah, just for everyone to keep on their radar. We won't give you specifics on the news because by the time this show releases, it will be outdated. But I just want to let everybody know that the TikTok case has now entered into the court phase. If you remember, Congress had passed a law telling TikTok that they would either have to be sold from their Chinese ownership of ByteDance or they would be closed down in the U.S. ByteDance and TikTok are suing currently. Day one, at least, it was not going great for TikTok. So just keep it on your radar because it will dramatically change the social media landscape when and if that judgment comes to fruition, or that law rather comes to fruition. And I'm not editorializing. I'm not on TikTok. I kind of don't care. But I personally feel like there is a very strong chance that TikTok will be banned or sold to a U.S. agency, a U.S. entity. By the deadline. So we'll see how it goes, but just keep it on your radar because it will impact everyone's social media ecosphere when it gets to fruition. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. All right, Brad. Well, our next question from patreon.com/comiclab comes in from Emily, and Emily writes, "Hey there, Brad and Dave. Social media is important, no doubt about that, but I hate it. And I hated it well before it even started falling apart. It feels like I'm talking to a brick wall. Every post is a chore, and I don't get to speak candidly. Everything has to be turned into some catchy phrase or joke or to keep people interested in what I have to say. And that interest doesn't last longer than a second or two most of the time. It is exhausting. I'm absolutely need to build my audience online, though. I get it, but I'm struggling to stay motivated and come up with ideas. I know social media is a bit rough for everyone right now, but I know I could really use some advice or words of encouragement, especially when it comes to posting frequently rather than just hiding myself away. Thank you all for your weekly advice. You guys are the best." Oh, that's very nice, Emily. Thank you for that. And Brad, Lord knows we have all felt the icy hand of social media from time to time. So what advice do you have for Emily on this one?
Well, listen, I don't know that I have anything that's particularly useful.
Well, that's been Comic Lab, everybody. All right, we'll see you next week.
I mean, we all feel that way, and part of it, I'll tell you that I've felt the same thing, and I'll tell you how I've mentally gotten around it, how I've mentally addressed it. For myself, because I can tell you, and by the way, we all say, I know social media is important, but I hate it. I don't know of too many people that truly love social media right now. There's a lot of people that have fond memories of when social media really worked.
Right.
But there's not too many people out there who love social media, although we all know that it still is something that you need to kind of keep your finger in until we get to the next phase of whatever the internet is going to be. But one of the things that has really helped me, a couple of things that has really helped me. Number one, I cut finally, and we've talked about this on the show, I cut a bunch of platforms that just were not working, right? Instagram, Facebook, I found out, I realized I'd forgotten to post on my Facebook page for a couple of weeks. I don't even know if anybody's noticed. But Instagram for sure, Threads, I've kind of cast aside. So I've shortened my load a little bit in that there are some that I've just proven to myself over and over and over again that they're going nowhere. And so I cut them. And that helped a lot. And number two was an attitude adjustment on my point, because I was used to, in the early days of social media, making a post and then see people reacting to it. Mm-hmm. And I know now that's just not going to happen. And once I started, like I always say, print this out and put it in your workspace. Well, hanging over there in my workspace is a little like Comic Lab quote that I printed for myself. Cartoonists make a big mistake when we assume people are paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once I had that attitude adjustment of I'm going to post this and I'm not going to get any response to it. But that, by the way, that doesn't mean that nobody's reading it necessarily, mm-hmm. or that that I'm not coming across their radar more and more often as they slow their scroll and the algorithm takes account of that and so and stuff like those kind of issues. I stopped worrying about whether people were responding. I stopped looking for likes and comments and shares. And in fact, and I've said this, I think 3 episodes in a row, I'm going to say it for a 4th one. I took all the social media off my phone. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even BlueSky and Threads, which I'm going to come around to in a little bit. I took them all off my phone. So then I just sit down once or twice a day on a desktop computer, like the old curmudgeon that I am. I either plan my posts if I'm working in a platform that allows me to plan. If not, I fire them off whenever I happen to be sitting there. I don't care about what time. I don't care about the time zone. Mm-hmm. I don't care about any of that. I just hit the button and then I close it and I go on with the rest of my life. Because the more you sit there and look at it, the more it's going to drive you crazy. You know that you've got to be doing it, but you know you're not going to get a response. Mm-hmm. So why am I sitting there staring at this? Why am I opening my phone every 5 minutes to see if somebody put a favorite on some dumb tweet that only lasts for a couple seconds anyway? You know you've got to keep that there. You know that there are some right now, and I think, Dave, I'm going to hand this off to you right in a second here. There are some that are working amazingly well, and those are the ones that I think you want to lean into. But even then, I don't know that I would sit there and torture myself with whether somebody's responding or not. I would hit the button, close the tab, and go on. And maybe like if you want to set up a time for like the end of your day to check in and see if somebody commented that you need to make a response to. But the days of I need to comment on this right away to juice the algorithm so it goes even further, those days are gone. Those days are gone. It doesn't matter when you comment. You're not going to juice the algorithm. The algorithm has been juiced in the other direction, and it ain't yours. It doesn't matter when you answer. Right. It matters that you, just out of politeness, it matters that you should. But I would say out of all of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth. If we were going to point anybody to one platform that they do want to pay attention to right now, it's in late 2024, it's BlueSky.
Yeah, it seems to be winning out the sort of interaction game. But let me jump back. I want to, in large part, I want to agree with Brad. I think Brad's strategy is really strong there. I don't personally do it the way Brad does it, but I really co-signed it as a great way to manage your mental health around social media. Brad sort of open it on a browser, post, and then forget it, and then just get it done no matter what time of day it is. That's really smart, because what he's done is he's minimized the cognitive load that social media is putting on him. And frankly, even though he didn't say it, he's minimizing the emotional load that social media, it's like it doesn't weigh on his heart in the way that it did 5 years ago. I will also jump in to say, like Brad, I have heavily minimized the social media that I do for completely pragmatic reasons. Let's talk about it. So long ago, I got rid of Facebook. It was not working for me. They were really throttling how easy, or in this case, how hard it was to get someone off platform, to my book sales, to my Patreon, to my Kickstarter. And so that was also the exact same pragmatic reason why I have now gotten off of Instagram. I'm now off of Threads. I'm now off of Twitter, also because it's a nationalist paradise, and I hate the way it's turning into. But I've stayed with BlueSky because for me, and this is not necessarily for you, Emily, but for me, it a little bit feels like early Twitter, where it's a bunch of my pals in cartooning all kind of chiming in on completely unrelated posts in a way that had sort of stopped happening on Twitter for reasons probably algorithmic. Where, like, if I see Brad talking to, doesn't matter, Cartoonists C, suddenly I'll be moved on BlueSky to chime in a way that it hasn't happened in like 10 years. And then it becomes fun, because then it's just pals chiming in on one another, right? And seeing stuff that, and in so doing, we're also obliquely spreading awareness of one another's work to each other's audiences, right?
Yeah.
So BlueSky also, though, let's get down to the brass tacks of it. BlueSky, for the number of followers that I had, punched way above its class in terms of how many people it delivered to my Kickstarter. So just on that alone, Emily, I was like, wow, can I highly recommend BlueSky? Because it's not so algorithmically governed. I'm sure it still does have algorithms working in the background that I'm not aware of, but it feels more like if I follow you, Emily, I'm going to see your posts, right? There's also ways to see... Brad doesn't seem to use it because he doesn't use the app, but on the app, there are ways to say, hey, I would like to see everything from people I follow. Hey, I would like to see a discovery tab. Show me things that the algorithm thinks I might like, right? And then there's a third tab that I find really delightful on BlueSky. Maybe this existed before on Twitter and I never saw it. It's called liked by friends, or loved by friends, or enjoyed by friends. It's basically, if Brad liked something or interacted with something, I'm going to get shown it to me. So, Emily, like when I'm at a doctor's office and I 100% have 20 minutes to burn because I'm sitting in the waiting room, what a great time to see what Brad's been up to on BlueSky or any other cartoonist that I love. And so I have found that useful. But in broad strokes, I just want to say, Emily, you are not alone. The one reason why we're all hating social media is that broadly as humans, we're realizing that it's artificial interaction. It's parasocial, not social. Like, I want to interact with my friend Brad. I don't necessarily want to interact with some simulacrum of Brad via avatars on BlueSky. You know what I mean? Like, it's our hearts are sensing that it's not real and it's not really impactful on our hearts. It is, like I said, parasocial. It's a simulacrum of what it is for humans to interact. We're missing genuineness. And so I'll just grab a name out of the hat. One of the reasons why I enjoy Ryan North on BlueSky or previously on Twitter is that he always has a genuineness to him. Is sometimes a thrown off phrase not particularly funny, not like worthy? Sure, but it's Ryan being Ryan, and I love that for my friendship of him and my love of him. That I think he's like, oh, that's really a delightful insight into Ryan's day, right? So I guess what I'm saying is a version of what's Brad saying: log on, make your post, get off, don't worry about the time, but also just be genuine. Just be genuine, because honestly. You might find that moves the needle more than the pithy statement that you spend 45 minutes crafting, you know, or the joke that you have to do. Just being genuine might get you as far as anything else on social media.
Yeah. I gotta say, my experience since Dave kind of convinced me to take a second look at BlueSky, my experience has been so much that it has kind of gotten me back into some old Twitter habits that had long since died off. For example, when somebody interacts with me on BlueSky, that's an instant follow. I want to follow that person.
Do you follow back? You do the old follow backs?
I really do, because social media is social.
Yeah.
And I saw, and of course, if they're not following me, then they end up following me. So I've been able to drive. I may have, in the last 2 weeks, I may have picked up close to 100. I've done pretty good, just expanding my reach. And also, I just find that genuinely, I kind of want to see those people's threads or their posts next time I do open the tab.
Oh, I see. You're like, well, if they like me, they must be interesting. They must be fun, wonderful
they
people.
Must be good. Well, and I've found out some really interesting people that way. So yeah, and that's again, that's why we kind of hammer away at some of these things. Like, we want you to have a good, worthwhile social media experience, but we don't want you to get so tied up in it that you're feeling like you're trapped, right?
Yeah.
That's why we harp on pride and joy, to give you some kind of idea. Okay, if you're trying to think out of nowhere, what do I post on this? That's hard. But if you're like, okay, why am I proud of this? That gives you something to go with.
Yes.
And that's the other reason why I always tell you that when you're getting ready to make a social media post, take a swig, right? Dave, we always say on this show, take a swig before you post something on social media, right?
What? Where is this going?
SWIG. Say why it's good.
Oh,
take a swig. Before you post that post, say why it's good. If you've got that focusing you then you're not, it's kind of like, okay, why is this good? Here's why it's good. Boom. And then you can get back to the rest of your life without putting in, you just take a swig. That's my new acronym. It's going to be every bit as big as FCS. It's swig.
Can I just make an appeal to everyone? Do you see what I have to deal with here? Take a swig. Also, what the hell was FCS? I don't even remember what FCS was.
I do this so you'll remember. Frequent, consistent, significant. That's the rate that you're supposed to post.
I love the idea that Brad's life is ruled by acronyms. He's like, well, swig. I'm home. That's MKMW. And the kids are like, what is MKMW? Must kiss my wife. If I'm home, it's an MKMW. I've got to go give her a smooch. Dad, stop using acronyms. Hey, that's an that's an SUI. What's SUI? Shut up, you. Come on now.
I heard on the last episode me saying, tell me why it's good. And I'm like, oh, that's almost a good acronym. How can I make that better? And then I hit swig and I'm like, Magoo, you've done it again.
Oh, Magoo. Oh, and in the meantime, your frustrated friend is over here smiling through it all.
Take a swig.
Take a swig.
You'll never forget that. You'll never forget it. Just like
but
FCS.
Also, Emily, to round this out, Brad and I get it. It's not always enjoyable. A part of it is the sort of tough love aspect is like, it's not enjoyable, but find the ones that still have utility for you. And that's key. If Instagram still has utility, keep with it. If Threads or God forbid, Twitter or Facebook or something, most likely, Emily, most likely it's going to be BlueSky or maybe Mastodon or Brad. I'm not on it, but Substack Brad's found success with. One of those is probably going to be the one that has utility for you because they're early in the enshittification process, and that's key. Yeah. So find the one that has utility, and then minimize the cognitive and emotional load it has on you. So maybe just schedule a time every day at noon. Don't give it too much time and thinking that you have to work up some pithy comment that's going to be the great zinger of life. And then swig, as Brad said, show me why it's good. Show me why it's good. Is that what it was?
Say why it's good.
Say why it's good. All right. See? So, and then remember, after you've memorized swig, Emily, don't forget to TYOAC. I don't have a good summary of that, but TYOAC, which throw yourself off a cliff after learning all of Brad's acronyms. All right, Brad, what's our next question that we got on the agenda for today?
I want to just, because this is related, Angela sent us a question, and it's kind of the same answer, so I wanted to put it in there.
Sure.
Angela was saying, when you plan ahead to post all your comics and other marketing-related posts on various social media, that's great. But when you have a one-off quick sketch on a restaurant placemat or a funny thought in your head, do you post it to just one platform or all? And other than the limitations of photo or video requirements, how do you decide which one to use? And I think, unless I'm going to like miss my guess, our answer is going to be kind of the same, is that don't overthink it. If you want to post it on one, post it on the one you think it works best. If you want to post it on all of them, post it on all of them. If you want to post it now, post it now. If you want to post it later, post it later. There is no edge here at this point. There's no one is going to tell you, oh, here's what you do, Angela. If you've got placemats, now placemat posts go on Twitter. If it was the back of a envelope of your electric bill, those go on BlueSky, right? And you want to post it between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock Eastern time. All of that stuff, I'm telling you, there was a time that I went right along with all of that stuff. I was following it all. And there was a time when there was a certain amount of veracity to it.
Yep.
Now I'm going to tell me if you agree or disagree. You're putting too much thought into it. Just post it and get on with your life. Hit the send button and then go live your life.
Yep.
At least for a little while, because social media is not giving you the returns that justifies the amount of thought you're putting into it right now.
Absolutely. I will say that there's two things in my life that I still schedule very specific postings and therefore endings. One is my eBay postings. And for the exact same reasons, my Kickstarter endings are both scheduled to end at a time that's very reasonable for people on the West Coast, East Coast, and Western Europe to get to, at a time that's at least partially reasonable for those time zones. Aside from that, like Brad, shine it. The algorithm doesn't necessarily reward you. And frankly, even if it does, it's a pittance in the grand scheme of your career to be like, all my social media posts of my comic have to be at 1 p.m. on a Thursday. Yeah. I mean, is there a benefit? Maybe, yes. We could probably argue that time zone, specific times, aiming for time zones is advantageous. But the problem, and what Brad and I are getting at here, is that the cognitive load, the emotional load, the worry of like, none of that is worth all of that for you, right? So again, pragmatically, and this goes to this question, find the social media platforms that are actively working for you and then post just to those. So when you say like, hey, if I have a back of envelope sketch, first of all, you can sense in your heart of hearts, it's not fun for you and therefore not genuine to post that same thing across 7 platforms. Yeah. So if you find yourself saying, well, I at least want to post it onto blank, right? Post it there. That probably is the platform that you're enjoying the most. And that enjoyment will translate into developing it in a pragmatic way that it benefits your career. So what I'm saying is it might be the time for all of us to start winnowing down this previous year's maintaining of 1 or 2 dozen social media sites that we were all doing, because it was a liminal period, and it kind of still is a liminal period. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I don't think we've landed on what the next big thing is yet. I do sense that BlueSky, especially since Brazilians came on to BlueSky, has had a huge, Brad's smiling at that, but that's a legit thing. Millions of Brazilians jumped on when Twitter got shut down in Brazil, and you could feel it on BlueSky. You're like, oh, wow, this took a jump up all of a sudden in terms of activity.
All of a sudden, I saw a lot of Portuguese.
Yeah, I saw a lot of Portuguese coming on. And by the way, Brazilians are great online. They're really friendly people. I love them. But what I'm getting at is my spidey sense is that BlueSky is about to take off exponentially. I genuinely feel like it's at the beginning of a growth curve. But it may not be the right one for you. But I do think in general, my advice would be now is the time to start winnowing down the ones that are definitely not working for anyone, which is Threads. And I don't care who you are. Threads is not working for you. It's not working the way you think it is. It's a terrible thing. I also hate Threads' stupid algorithm where it posts something that's a half-completed thought so that you'll click into the thread just because you're trying to figure out what the damn thing is. I hate it. I see them doing it, and it works, but I hate it, and therefore I'm dumping out of that system because I hate the whole GD thing.
I'll give you one worse on Threads that actually was the last straw for me. They keep posting, so-and-so posted their first thread. And the problem with that is everybody's first thread is, well, I guess I'm starting a new social media. I wonder how this works. And I don't want to and I see that like every other day. So-and-so posts the first thread. And it's like, what does this button do? I wonder what this button does. And they're not funny. They're not clever. And I get them fed to me every other day. And it's driving me crazy. It's like, that's it. No more threads.
Yeah. So I Threads is off for me. Again, for me, it was Threads is off, Instagram's off, Facebook's off, Twitter's off, and then do with that what you will. If Mastodon's working for you, if BlueSky, Substack, go with where your heart is telling you to go, and where pragmatically it's working for you.
There's something that you said earlier about social media not being fun, and you know how I like to work a theme into a show. And when you said that, I realized we do kind of have a little bit of a theme here, because listen to our next question. This comes in from a Patreon backer who says, hey, Comics Uncles, I've realized that I have sapped all of the fun out of making art by taking it way too seriously. I would think if it's not my best work, why bother trying? So anytime I draw, I feel like I must give it my all. This sort of thing isn't sustainable. It's like slowly turning daily walks into daily marathons, getting burnt out and not having any fun in the process. Do either of you relate? If so, do you have any tips or strategies to make art fun again? Dave, how do we make art fun again?
Well, first of all, I want to say, yes, I completely relate to this. And I just want to say from a writing standpoint, I really think the visual metaphor of saying I've been turning my daily walks into daily marathons, that's a really evocative and powerful way to describe it. And boy, do I relate to that. So good on you for that turn of phrase. I also feel like sometimes my art is not fun because if I'm not putting out my best stuff, why am I bother doing it?
Yeah.
But I'm enough of a pro now where my professional side kicks in and I'm like, well, back to the drawing board anyway, shine your feelings, kind of a thing, and get back to work. Hexarth, I relate to this because we've started a project where Kevin, Brad, and I are drawing a thing with a prompt, right? And all three of us are drawing at the same time, and then we reveal it to each other. And here's the thing about it, Hexarth, that's fun for me as a 25-year professional. I'm not drawing it thinking like, how will these colors work in a CMYK format when I print it? I'm not drawing it thinking, how can I market this or sell this on eBay or then put it into a book or then in the way that my cartooning career has prompted me to think about all of my drawing now. It's purely me drawing, trying to make my two friends laugh when I eventually show the revealed image, right? There is nothing about that that's not pure fun. For me, anyway, it is pure fun. I love it. I can't wait for you to see the project that we're doing. But anyway, I love it. And if nothing else, it shows me the contrast of my daily and weekly drawing, which is very aware of setting up the file so that it's ready for print, very aware of how I'm going to eventually market or monetize that file. Does that make sense, Brad? Like it's a clear distinction between the thing that we've been doing with Kevin, which is purely fun, and the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis. So I guess my question in turning it to you, Brad, is do you feel that? And am I alone on that one?
So let me ask you this, because this is where it gets interesting. That project yesterday took 3 hours.
It did. It did take 3 hours.
If not a little bit more than 3 hours. Would you have done that if we didn't have very set laid out plans for this project and where this project is going?
I see where you're going, and the answer is no. I would not have done it.
No, me either. In other words, if we didn't have
a structure that led to something that pays off at the end for us,
if it wasn't being recorded, if there wasn't something, an end game involved with this, you and I would have never ever have done that. As fun as it was, and it's by the way. I love recording this podcast with you. I enjoy seeing you on the other side of the screen and talking comics. You're the most fun comics. If our Patreon went to 0 tomorrow, I'd be finding something else to do next Tuesday.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah, I'd have to.
I'm laughing, but you're not wrong.
We'd still talk. It's not like I would shun you and you'd never hear my voice again. We would still talk comics, but we wouldn't set aside 2 hours every Tuesday to do this show. We'd go and find something else to do, would we not?
Right, because not in a braggy way, but just to point it out, we've been doing this for 25 years, and part of the reason we've been doing this for 25 years is we've been able to keep our nose to the wind and knowing what's going to be able to pay for the bills at the end of the month for 25 years, right? And so part of that is saying, hey, is this time management worth it in terms of the payoff for the mortgage at the end of the month, right? And so that's just the part of the gig that's the job, right? Is knowing, can I make a living at this? Can this be turned into income? Is this worth my time financially?
Yeah.
But yes, it does sap a little bit of joy out of it. But guy, I'm drawing pictures, silly pictures with silly jokes that I wrote and silly storylines. There is, at the end of the day, I fall asleep going, there's nothing about this that feels like I'm digging a ditch or a fence post or something, right? Like I am working, yes, I'm keeping my horizon line is on the idea of like, can I make money with this? Yes, but it's still fun as hell.
I agree 100%. And that's why I think our advice to this person has to be bilateral. And what I mean by
bilateral.
that
is that a part that's over the trestle, or is that connected to the trestle?
That's when it comes over the transom, gets split in two, and then hits the trestle.
Oh,
and
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then you listen, and that's a treble note. So it's transom, trestle, treble.
God, you got me.
And that's the trouble. That a lot of people have transom, trestle, treble trouble.
That's the trouble with troubles, or the trouble with trebles, rather.
But I think it has to be two answers. If this person is making a living doing comics, they're making not even a living, making a significant part of their income doing comics, then, well, like, let's face it, if you're doing that, then you probably learned a long time ago that this isn't always going to be fun. And if if this is part of what you're doing, you've either come to grips with that, or you're going to have to come to grips with that. It's not always fun when we sit down. Again, like Dave said, it's not digging ditches, but sometimes there's a page I've got to do, and it's like, oh God, there's no interesting challenges on this page. It's all image, it's all
rote.
It's all
rote.
there. Yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing. There's nothing fun I've got to conquer. And sometimes those are the hardest pages to do. Those are the ones that take the longest because I can't get excited about them. But I'm going to guess that this person isn't there at that point, right? I'm going to guess that this comic is not bringing in a significant amount of money. And by the way, there's no shame in that. We've all gone through amateur and pro-am phases. And if that's where you happen to be right now, I'm going to give you what my advice is. And I really want you to take this advice. I really, really want you to take this advice. Take a break. If you're putting this page together and it's not fun, and you're missing the fun, and you're yearning for that fun again, then you should take a break. Because if you force yourself to do it, it's just going to get worse. So and I mean a serious break, like maybe 4 to 6 weeks where you don't do comics at all. Just do something else creative, or maybe do something that's not creative. Maybe read a book or volunteer at the hospital. But don't do comics for at least 4 weeks. Take a complete
If it's not part
break.
of their income, you're saying. If it's not part of their income.
If it's part of your income, then you gotta put your big boy pants on and get to business. But if it's not, I want you to take a break, because I see so many people who are just at the very beginning phase of their comic. They maybe started this year, or they've been doing it in a time period that's easier measured in months than years. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. And they say, "Oh, I can't take a break. I'll lose whatever momentum that I have."
Right.
Do you remember feeling like that
in
the early 2000s?
Yeah.
I felt like that. Yep. You felt like that. And looking back, it was dumb because when I first started out, when my career was more easily measured in months, I thought I had momentum. I didn't have shit. I just had a couple of habitual readers, but I certainly didn't have momentum. And you know what's the best way to build momentum back? Posting good comics. That builds your momentum like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So we've got all these people at the pro-am level or the amateur level, and they, like this person writing, desperately need to take a break. And they don't think they can because they're scared of what happens if they step off the merry-go-round, that they lose their momentum, or the readers are going to forget about all of those things that you and I, looking back over 25 years, know that it's silly. It's not going to, you'll get them right back. And if not, you'll find some new ones. There's an infinite number of readers. If you actually lose readers, guess what? There's an infinite number of readers out there waiting for you to take your place. And if you post good comics, guess what? They're going to come. And you're not going to post good comics if you're burning yourself out. You need to take a break. I'm telling you, there's nothing, and there's nothing more important than giving yourself at this point. Dave cannot take a break. If I tell Dave, hey, Dave, you're working yourself too much. You're working yourself to a bone. Dave Kellett, I want you to take a break for 4 weeks. Dave's going to be like, great, that's fantastic. I'm going to do it. Here's where you got to send the check for my mortgage. Here's the amount of money you got to put over for my electric bill. Unless you're willing to take over Dave's bills, you can't tell him to take a break. Right? This is his business now.
By the way, I want to publicly thank Brad for taking over my bills next month. This is great. Yeah. Brad, thank you, Brad, as a friend, for publicly saying you would do it. I appreciate this.
I will send him that check.
It will
promise. That check will bounce right over the transom. You better believe it will. But no, if you're not at that point, Dave, don't you think we need to start advocating more strongly for people at the amateur and pro-am level to take a fucking break?
Yes, but it's also easy for us to say to other people, you need to take a break when we will never, ever give it to ourselves. Yeah,
but no, we can't. We can't. But wouldn't it have been better for us creatively in the early 2000s?
Okay, let me say it this way, because I see what you're saying, and I actually do agree with you that a break is good, because I think one of the hardest parts of starting anything new that you want to take from amateur to pro-am and then eventually to pro is somewhere between the 2 and the 12-month mark. It stops being purely fun. The spark that got you into it is still there, as it still is for Brad and I. The spark is still there, but it is diminished. And there are days where you're sick. There are days where a relative died. There are days where emotionally your relationships are in arguments or something. And so your creative spark is diminished. And you still have to find your way through all of that sludge to create something. And it stops becoming pure spark. And it a little bit starts becoming a job. And that we just have to say there's a reason why it's called professional cartooning. It is a job, right? It's no longer just shits and giggles. Hey, I'm in a good mood. I'm going to make a comic. It's also, and this has been true in my life, my grandmother just died. And also the mortgage is due next week. And I'm stressed about someone's health in my life, right? Legitimate things that I have gone through, and yet I have to try to make myself be funny and write this silly little and draw this silly little thing to share with people, because that's what pays the bills. And so that's the transition to pro, right? And so in the 2-month to 12-month range of when people start, they kind of feel that you know what I mean? They can see that it's not just, hey, I was in a great mood 2 months ago when I started, and everything was fun and new and bright. And now it's a little bit more, there is some drudgery to this. And there is some requirement to work when I don't feel like it. This is a terrible reference, but Brad doesn't remember the 1984 version of the movie Dune that had Jean-Luc Picard in it. Anyway, at one point, Paul Atreides doesn't want to fight. He's like being asked to be trained to fight. And he's like a kid. And he's like, I don't want to fight anymore. I'm not in the mood. And Patrick Stewart says, mood is for cattle and love play. You've got to be able to fight when you're being asked to fight, right? And so I don't know why that line has always stuck with me. Like moods are for cattle and love play. The idea, though, that like when you transition from amateur to pro-am to professional, There is a slow transition where mood doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel. You have to produce this thing. This is the job. This is the gig, right? And so much like your boss doesn't care if you're not feeling it on Thursday morning at 8 a.m., you got to go at 8 a.m. and go to work, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit what the transition is from amateur to pro-am to pro.
I guess that's why I want to advocate for taking a break even stronger, because
that's
later
why I agree
on,
with you. Yes.
Later on you can't. And also, by the way,
it's also a good testing ground, Brad, just to reinforce your point. If you do take a break and you miss it terribly, then you know you're ready to get back in. If you don't miss it, maybe it's a sign that it wasn't more than a hobby. Like it's just meant to be an occasional, every once in a while thing in your life. And that's fine if that's the case, by the way.
Yes. And in fact, I want that to happen in some of these cases. Right. I've seen so many people over 25 years. I've seen so many people stick with comics because they thought comics was their thing, and they were dogged in their determination. And they needed to take a break and maybe consider doing some other things for a little while,
right?
Because it wasn't until then that it isn't until you take a break and consider other options that you find out. Like one guy I know from back in the day, it got to the same point, and then all of a sudden he segued into video game making. And cartoonist, this person was very good, but he wasn't getting the traction that he wanted to get. Right. As a video game creator, a small indie video game creator, he's amazing. He's fantastic. And he wouldn't have gotten to that point unless he would have taken a break. And the other part that I really want to get around to real quick is that's the only answer we can give you. Any other answer we can give you is going to be made up fairy tales. What are we going to do? Are we going to tell you to wear green pants next Thursday because that's the secret to finding the fun again? That doesn't work like that. There's not a pill. There's not a chant. There's not an incantation. None of that stuff is out there. There's no magic way to make that fun come back again. There isn't. I'm sure there's people out there willing to tell you that they've got the answer, but you know deep down what the answer is. The answer is you need to take a break. You need to give yourself a little rest. You can't keep doing this all this time. At a certain point, you need to take a break. Speaking of which, you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my ever-delightful friend, Brad Geiger, who welcomes you over the trestle as editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my over-the-transom friend, Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And as we move across the train tracks, the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever-wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
And I'll say this in a treble key. If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode.
Oh, boy.
That's okay. They're not listening anymore.
I just was trepidatious about that. I will say, if you're a Trekkie and you love Trouble with Tribbles, Comic Lab is made possible by your support over at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/still don't know what trestle means.
Keep on trucking. Trestle. Now, trestle is like a bridge that a train goes over. That's a trestle.
That's a train trestle?
Train trestle, yeah.
So is a trestle anything that's being held up by two vertical slats? It's the horizontal bit that's being supported by two vertical slats. Is that what that trestle is?
Yes. As a matter of fact, you must be looking in your Oxford dictionary.
I am not. Look at me. I have no dictionary in front of me.
It says right here, a framework consisting of horizontal beams supported by two pairs of sloping legs used in pairs to support a flat surface like a tabletop. But I've always seen it in trains.
Wait,
train trestle.
What's the part about sloping? Does it have to be at an angle? Is that part of a trestle? Is a trestle an angled support for a horizontal? Is that what it is?
It must be. It must be. Yeah, because it does say that it's an angled support.
Oh.
Otherwise, they're just legs under a table.
What a wonderful gang! This has been another episode where we take you through the variegation and variation of the English language. And how delightful for you that you're joining us on this journey. Tune in next week when we learn a new word, bougainvillea. Bougainvillea, next week's word on Comic Lab.